Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome to Kizazi Moto, a intriguing little initiative from Disney in kind of the vein of Star Wars Visions, where Disney contacts a series of small studios and asks them to produce for them little animated self-contained shorts. But this time, the twist is not that it's all set in the Star Wars universe. What is the twist this time, kids?
The twist today is that it's only from African studios, meaning no Western studios, no Eastern studios, only Africa.
Yes, which is... See, part of me is thinking about this and going like, okay, wasn't your primary complaint that there were too many people of a certain color making entertainment, and your solution is to make sure that only people of a certain other color is making entertainment? I suppose this is what we refer to as positive discrimination.
Yes, it is locking out all the others, whereas the Vision stuff recruited from India, from Japan, Korea, America, various places around the world. Here we see only Africa, so it's a weird reverse policy that they've adopted here. So we're only going to see stuff that's produced by African animation studios.
Now, what I will say is that, at the very least, this is honest diversity. For once, they aren't simply going like, oh, you know, we took Aragorn and made him black. Diversity. This is actual stories made by the, creators of this culture. So the hope is that we will be seeing something unique, as that is, of course, the purpose. And to be fair, Africa does not get a hell of a lot of a spotlight in the massive, Western-dominated entertainment medium of today. So I do not disapprove of the initiative, as much of a current year initiative as it is.
Yep, because if we have this, where we have, African studios producing African media, then surely there's no reason to hijack other Western IPs.
Surely they will leave ours alone.
Yeah, like, okay, you got your toys, now leave mine alone.
So the first episode, not the first in the series, we're going to take this a little bit out of order because there is some significant variations in quality here. So we're going to start with episode 8. This was by far our favorite one as we watched it here. And this is far more of an Arabian-inspired setting. But you can clearly tell that this studio has a lot more experience in creating self-contained stories, because it has a very clear beginning, it has a very clear middle, and it has a very clear end. It tells a story from beginning to end. You can stay with it, it has a decent enough end up, it has a good build up, a good setting, etc. A lot of the others forget about this basic of storytelling.
Yes, it goes for more so spectacle rather than any sort of cohesive actual plot.
Yes, some of them go for almost pure visuals rather than the actual telling of a story. Whereas here, we see a universe in which a person's destiny is largely determined by random scrolls being handed out by a prophet, which can declare you to be a doctor, incidentally.
There's a scene, I kid you not, where they open one of the scrolls, and it's like, yay, I'm a doctor! And it's like, okay.
No medical license required.
All right, you're a doctor. Here you go fix people up.
And our young protagonist gets an empty scroll. And it's like, oh my god, I'm really disappointed. My scroll is empty, what the hell? And it's hardly the most subtle of setup, as the Oracle is like, I think this one will suit you very well. And then she, gets on the Oracle's wagon, and of course she becomes the next Oracle. It's hardly the most complex of story, but it's a decent one, and it gets the point across. Like, you can choose your own destiny.
Which gives it the unique idea of like, okay, that's not a bad moral or message there.
Not at all. And visually too, it was very good. Nice, smooth animations, good, high quality. I would in fact say that the visual quality here is easily on par with other relatively major productions. Like, this could easily compare to the Clone Wars, for example.
Oh, yes, definitely agree with that. It actually, in some cases, looks actually a little better when it comes to lighting and overall visual effects.
Yeah, so this one was by far our favorite. And then you've got some really weird ones. So now we're going to move on to episode 10, which this was our least favorite, I think we can safely say.
Yeah, this one was just weird. Like right off the bat, the horribly horrific low frame rate choice just gives it that almost nauseating feel as things are just juddering around.
Yes, like it's rendered at half the frames you would expect, which gives it a very unsettling, discomforting style, and I'm not sure that was their intention.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think they were trying to make it like, oh look, it's like 3D but animated like 2D.
Sort of, like almost like they tried for almost like a semi-pseudo-realistic claymation-y style almost.
Yeah, it visually didn't look good. And the plot of this one is a strange one at that.
Yes, so we are introduced to gods who live in sacred space, and we can see Earth out the window, focusing in on Africa. And they are gods of creation as well. So the little girl creates a strange, warped fox monstrosity, whose first words, if it could speak, would probably be, "Kill me, I am in pain.
I'm an abomination."
And this then gets juxtaposed to what I presume to be then actual Earth, as is indicated throughout the series. Now, again, this is something that will return several times in this series, where Africa is displayed as an absolute hellhole.
Yeah, unironically. Like, the moment the little girl leaves her room where her mom said not to leave, it reveals a dirty, rugged, tin, hovels stacked on top of each other in a dying, decadent world.
Yes, where Kenya Corp uses machines that are literal giant mechanical mosquitoes to suck blue from the ground. I don't know what blue is, but it's important.
I assume blue is like the life force of Gaia, so to speak. If we're to be, super tree huggery here.
Presumably. So yes, humanity bad, Africa bad, Africa E.T. God. And so the child goes like, okay, well, I've got to save mommy. Like, the funny part, mother is out trying to save presumably Africa, right? And she fails. And the solution then becomes for her daughter to create a brand new world of textile bugs and plants and tentacles and shit. And then they flee to this brand new world. And her mother is like, oh, but what about Earth? And the daughter's like, fuck Earth. Look up in the sky. It's like brown and dead and shit.
They gotta save themselves. It's not our problem. And then they start dancing. And then the credits roll. And then it's like, what?
The message of the story appears to be God has abandoned Africa. Get fucked.
Like, you should stop trying. Like, there's no reason to try. Like, literally, that's the message here. Give up. Roll over and die.
And again, I mention Africa instead of Earth because every time you see Earth, it is Africa in the focus. And of course, the god is an African woman wearing African garb, etc. Everything has an African feel to it. So
the African gods abandon Africa. That's all I got out of it.
And then they're just like, well, saving. I mean, do your best, I guess. God abandoned you. That is
literally.
That is not a message I expected to receive from this series.
Yeah, it was a experimental choice, a brave choice, if you could say.
Certainly. I didn't like it. Like the end of it is give up. The frame rate also indicates that maybe you should indeed give up.
Maybe animating this, you should have stopped somewhere along the line.
The art direction is not very appealing. This was my least favorite one by quite some distance.
Yeah, it just was awkward.
So another one that I kind of liked, right? So moving on to episode 2. Now this one Story-wise, oh, this is some hard trigger stuff right here.
Oh,
The
yes.
animations here are quite nice. They are quite colorful. They are very lively. They are nice and smooth. I quite like them. Very, very studio triggery, as mentioned. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, now is it? The story itself, however, is completely off the rocker. So we are introduced to a small African community, which again is constructed primarily of favelas and street stands, and it is bought up from underneath the feet of the local African community by a blue alien person who is like, race me or I'll evict your family from your ancestral homelands. Okay.
Yeah, it was a weird plot. I think it was definitely focusing heavily on the animations, because when you watch this thing, like, it goes from 1 to 100 very quickly, because it is accelerationist when it comes to the animation quality, and when it goes back to its sort of chibi aesthetic when it's not relevant.
Yes, because the story here is that your ancestors are always watching, and you have a right to your homeland, I guess, which is a very based take, isn't it?
Yes.
I wonder if you'll extend that line of argument to other groups at some point.
Oh yes, a little bit of equality.
And I actually quite like the ending. So the ending ends in a foot race where the giant blue fish shark person thing ties with the young boy defending his homeland. And he's like, okay, bro, that was a pretty good fight. Let's do this again. I won't, violate your village or anything. Which I kind of like, because it's not a clear victory or a clear loss. It's more like a, good fight. You stood up for yourself. The world isn't heartless. I can respect that.
Yep, they even shake hands. The antagonist is like, you know what? I respect you now.
Yeah,
and they
because
shake
he
hands,
wasn't
and it's
actually a
like
bad guy. Like, it's a far more hopeful episode than the preceding one.
It goes to show you that not everything's just black and white.
Yes.
Not everyone's just evil. You can actually put aside your differences. It had a good message, all
Yes.
things considered.
I didn't mind that one at all. It was a bit heavy on the spectacle, but again, these are 10-minute episode snippets, so some
Yeah,
pacing
little
issues
time.
are near inevitable. Then we've got another weird one. Episode 9. So,
Oh boy.
episode 9 begins with people comparing their follower counts on social media. I'm not joking.
This is African culture, everyone.
So this is one of the things. Okay, African culture. It'll give us something unique and spectacular and strange and weird that we've never seen before. Social media? TikTok? And there are 2 episodes focused around TikTok, basically. Okay. So this is a popularity contest where our 3 little TikTokers are competing about becoming the next god of creativity. Where they're surrounded by gods, and all of the gods are basically social media personalities. And the winner, the little red-headed guy, wins by, humiliating another social media personality, showing that in reality they're not this towering, enormous black goddess creature, but rather a fat little pudgy man. Like, okay, that is... That's an interesting point. How do you become popular? Tearing other people down.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, you're not wrong. He then needs to gather 1 million followers in a day, otherwise he will not be recognized as a god. And it then shows heaven, where all of the gods are working on their blogs to maintain their follower counts.
Yeah. It's all... I honestly was like, wait, is this supposed to be about Africa? Or is this like some sort of like, recognizing like about, you shouldn't worry about having so many followers. And the animation style is actually particularly painful in this one.
I didn't mind it. Actually, I feel like it almost is intentionally painful because the point later on is that the mask comes off and reveals that the big black goddess woman is actually just, a normal chick, And that is overall the point of the show, that you should be normal instead of a social media freak, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it's put across as so remarkably destructive, because in the end, the new god of creativity, who is an enormous dust bunny, is the best way I can describe him as, tears down heaven, TikTok, and then deletes his social media profile, and all of the gods are then revealed again for what they are, like fat little pudgy people, not worthy of worship. It's like, okay, I get the message. Don't hero worship social media personalities. Most of them put on a facade. Their perfect life isn't real. There is a real world out there that you get engaged with instead. But it's presented in such a weird, near uniformly negative way.
Yeah, I feel like the only thing I could think of while watching this episode was like, I guess in Africa there's a huge problem with social media consuming people to the point where they become so obsessed with like Instagram and those kinds of things and Pinterest that they become blinded by it, perhaps?
Social media makes monsters of us all.
Yeah, like it dehumanizes, and maybe that's the whole thing. It's like it just seeing it only for the numbers, because there's a whole point when eventually the guy takes advantage of the girl and starts taking pictures of her without her consent. But because people see what she really looks like, her follower count drops, and all of a sudden, like, she loses her god status and none of her stuff works. And so
because
the whole
she's been
thing
cancelled.
Yep, and they say it literally. She's been cancelled.
Like, the message in this one was okay, but convoluted and delivered in an weird way. And I also love the part, like, okay, the bad guy is like, oh, look at this normie, like, what the hell, he's such a normie, like, lol, 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 you should dislike him. And that's come across as very negative. But the hero revealing how the other people look and making fun of them is put across as very positive. Is like it didn't have a good idea of what it was trying to say, and so it ends up having the hero do exactly the same thing as the villains, but be applauded for it.
Yeah, that's what's weird. It's like, I revealed who they were without their consent and destroyed their career. I'm a good guy. It's like, okay, like, is it really your, right to reveal these people?
It was a confused one, and one of my less favorite ones. Let's talk about episode 7. So this one, episode 7, has the most forced conflict I have seen ever. It begins with the first and only, I think, non-black protagonist characters in the entire series, which are blue fish people. I'm like, okay, blue fish people, right? Okay, and they are currently at a war with black surface people who hunt them down and genocide them for reasons that have not really been explained. And this is revealed to be because a woman figured out how to use bath salts. I'm not kidding. She pours sodium chloride, salt, into water, and this turns her into a fish person. This then causes an enormous racial war between the fish people and the normal people.
Because as it turns out that this making bath salts apparently heals people of their illnesses if they're like terminal, and so a bunch of people started healing themselves, which the other people were like, oh, how dare you heal yourself.
Yes.
We can't stand looking at you because you're blue and have fins now, despite you not dying from your illness that you were going to totally die from.
Yes, and this apparently then causes this multi-generational war, because they find an ancient artifact. Like, this is an ancient artifact. This genocidal conflict must have gone on for hundreds of years for reasons. Like, the point of the story at the end is, of course, that the fishman helps the other guy, and they join hands together, and they go like, oh god, it was all a misunderstanding. We must teach our people the correctness of joining together, because at the end of the day, we're all the same. which is one of the classical things, like we're all brothers, etc. But it's delivered so enormously ham-fistedly as to ruin the entire point of it, because there is no reason for their conflict beyond, hey, Lee, you look weird. I guess I hate you now.
Yeah, you look weird. You're far away from me and underwater, but because of that, we're going to war with you.
We are literally going to develop a series of technology, weapons, breathing suits, etc., just to genocide. So this is dedication. I'll grant them that.
It is peculiar.
Yes, didn't like that one too much. Episode 6, our second episode about social media clout. Apparently, this is a big deal in Africa. I was not aware, I will admit.
Yeah, I mean, we learn something new every day. But yeah, it starts off right off the bat at the sort of like a vlogger who's doing some like stuff, and people are going like responding to him, and he's taking selfies, and that is the entire like thing that happens throughout this entire episode. By the way.
Yeah. So our vlogger is trying to trend on Twitter or TikTok or God ever knows. And he is trying to do so by graffiti tagging whilst bungee jumping off an ancient monument, which he's currently in the midst of desecrating. And this makes him very popular on social media for all of about 5 minutes until Rasta Cat, who's a cat who plays Rasta music, I guess, knocks him off the #1 spot and makes him very angry.
Yep.
God help me sometimes.
It's just weird.
He then crashes into his own graffiti defilement of the ancient statue, which creates a time vortex, which shoots him into an alternative multiverse future of Greater Zimbabwe. Which is Zimbabwe if it was never colonized by those evil, filthy white demons.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Well, I wasn't surprised by this point when we got to this episode. I was like, yep, here comes the racism, as we expect from Disney nowadays.
To be fair, this was the only, overtly, white people took this from us episode. Many of them have some overtones and undertones of it, but this was the first one to just go yeah, if white people hadn't come to Zimbabwe, we would have been cyberpunk by now.
We'd have, flying space saucer things, and we'd fly, and birds would chase us.
Now, I must say, I question this narrative, because Great Zimbabwe was it was a city which housed up to 18,000 people at its grandest in the 15th century, which isn't that impressive, I'm afraid to say. I don't think that would have evolved into cyberpunk, even if Whitey didn't show up, unfortunately.
Yes. Because in antiquity, Rome was in hundreds of thousands at its peak.
They then spend a lot of time being chased by the future multiverse police officer, which is a giant golden bird. But it turns out that the police was actually the good guys all along, you see, because the bird just wanted to send them back home again to the real world. Presumably because in the 5 minutes that our hero has been in future cyberpunk Africa, he has committed, I believe, several felonies. He has ruined a statue, he has broken a major monument, he has stolen a car, he has attacked several people, he has fought against the police bird, zapping it with a weapon which he procured illegally from another character.
Yep. Endangering other people's lives by knocking one of these saucers out of traffic, sending it careening down to the planet with people inside of it.
So in the end, the bird simply wanted to reduce the crime rates again, I suppose.
Listen, in future Zimbabwe is perfect, but people from the wrong timeline are just irreversibly,
It would seem so. It was another episode that had a very weird plot. But anyways, he returned to the real world along with the girl he rescued from Great Zimbabwe, future Zimbabwe, who now finds her mother, who is still there because she too was thrown into the time loop thingy. Now Rastacat is still number 1 on trending on Twitter, which is unfortunate, but our protagonist has now realized that there are more important things, as he calls his father, which is again like, I appreciate the message, but you could have delivered it in a less ridiculous way, I suppose.
Yeah, without the absurd things going on. Because the problem with all the other things that happen here is there's actually a lot of mixed messages with these undertones that don't really quite make sense or contradict one another. But unfortunately, this seems to be something that these shorts seem to suffer from. And it might be like what Arch and I have talked about before, in the 10-minute time frame. It's just not enough time to really flesh out a story or a character here.
Yes, because bearing in mind that some of the point of this was to be Afrofuturistic too. Which is, Afrofuturism is a genre which literally says that, okay, if Whitey didn't arrive, we'd be Wakanda by now. Which, fair enough, okay. You may have your fantasies, there's nothing wrong with that. But it feels like this studio, in this case, wanted to tell a different message, and then they kind of had to force in the Afrofuturism in there as well, which is why it feels so weirdly disjointed.
Yeah, it doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yes, there is also a lovely part in there where there is a giant billboard saying, "You can help support Canada now. It takes a village to raise a nation." And New York Safari Tours Summer 2017. So it literally has become that the rest of the world is now the poor Africa that the Africans must support.
And so in order for Africa to be prosperous, the rest of the world, Asia, Europe, the Middle East, America, South America, the Micronesian Isles, etc., they must suffer.
Presumably.
Weird message.
But on
bit
par
tone deaf
overall.
with the overall series, yes.
Not necessarily shocking or surprising. And speaking of shocking and surprising, episode 5. This episode has no reason to exist. It's completely off the rails. It is one long, insane acid trip.
Yes.
It too is very much like Blood and Soil in that, you must worship your ancestors. Your ancestors know best for you, but you can still determine your own future because you are an empowered young African woman. Because here the ancestors give you special magic powers, which you use to get on the bus. Because you need to hold your hand up to the bus, and the bus goes la 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 la.
It literally does that, by the way. He's not kidding.
Yes. And if you don't have your special ancestor powers, you cannot ride the bus. Which is, again, an interesting design. In this case, however, the young empowered African woman determines that, yes, I will worship my ancestors, but I'll take, all of my ancestors, please. So I shall be a doctor, a magical healer, a shaman who calls the lightning, and a, physical scientist or something?
Yeah, she's gonna be a Mary Sue is what she decided. Literally.
Presumably.
She's like, you know what? Instead of being a balanced character, I'll just become a Mary Sue. And be good at everything.
Yes, I get the message, okay. Be your own person, but also, appreciate what came before you. Fair enough, but again, delivered in the weirdest way. As if they were told by Disney, okay, you've got 10 minutes to make this message, and we can make this in 3, though. And they're like, no, 10. Oh, okay, padding, here we go.
Need to extend it. Yes, because it's all about her getting her totem, and it's the most acid trip journey of all of them, I think. Where we literally sat and watched this episode and it was just silence, as we were just like, what the fuck?
Just absorbing what the hell was going on. Episode 3, which is the second last episode we'll talk about. This one was the one that had perhaps the most interesting creative story in it. So we are introduced to a young boy who is weirdly grey. And he's living in this weird world which seems like a shattered ruin of something. And he has an item over his heart that apparently needs to be recharged by some sort of artifact. Okay, mysterious and weird. And it has some pretty cool monster design as well. This was probably the most African one, the one that felt the most like it took from African inspiration to create something I genuinely hadn't seen before. Because even like Great Zimbabwe is, okay, it's just a cyberpunk city. How is this uniquely African?
It's literally Western too. Like it was like incapable of coming up with its own identity because they just couldn't not be the West.
Yes. Whereas this one, at least with the monster design, is rather interesting. So the story here is that God went like, I really hate Africa. And so it sent soul-eating monsters to eat the Africans. And then an African woman was like, God, that's pretty unfair. Like, surely we must be able to fix this. And God's like, yeah, no, we can do this. You erect a bunch of, like, lampposts and sacrifice your firstborn son to me, and I'll protect you from the monsters I created. Okay.
Yeah. God's a dick in this universe, by the way.
God is a dick in this universe. The woman, not wanting her people to be wiped out by soul-eating monsters, which, fair enough, decides to agree and sacrifices her son. So she puts him in a capsule, and this creates the barriers to send the monsters back to hell. But then, being a greedy little bitch, she decides she wants to have her child too. So she breaks the barrier into hell yet again to rescue her son, which is the gray-skinned individual we saw. This then brings the demons back to Earth again and continues their rampage, killing uncountable further lives, no doubt. But they go back, and her shadow son self connect to her real-life son self.
It's like a spirit connecting with the physical body, if I had to guess.
Yes, via a Unilink USB port. And this then creates a big purple boom, which banishes the demons yet again. And so God was thwarted. Because he didn't see this one coming, I guess.
I guess, like, God's just gonna give up. Like, he's like, I didn't know you could do that. And to be fair, like, who would have thought that? You even see in that scene that it blows off those really interesting designed monsters. Again, this is like the most African one, I think, when it comes to culture roots, because it's got a very unique aesthetic.
Yes.
And you see the people being freed from the coils of those demons. So they're basically, what I guess, is banished from the mortal realm?
Sent back to hell. And then the short ends, which presumably, they defeated evil. Alternatively, God was then just like, round 2.
All right, humans, you think I'm gonna just stop here?
You think you're clever, huh?
Let's try Demon Mark II. That's right.
I see I was a bit too soft on you the first time. And then episode 1, which also they tried to lean heavy on the style and the design here, but it comes across as ill-directed. So there's a herd of cows. Now cows are very important in ancient African society. Like it was basically wealth. Like the Zulus traded in cows and so on. So it was a big deal. These are cyberpunk cows, which means they glow blue, and they eat grass, but not so the black people can eat the cows, but rather so they can harvest the blue crystals that grow on the cow's horns. Don't ask me why, because the show doesn't tell me. I have no answer for you.
It'll never explain that.
Yes. It will never explain that. But the cow's well-being is endangered by red. So blue good, red bad. Fair enough.
Temper color coding, yeah.
Yep, fair enough. So red cat, dog, hyena thing arrives, and it shoves one of the cows, a calf, into its mouth, and then runs off with it, and then ties it down.
Yeah.
Was it? I mean,
Is it gonna
Was it
eat
trying to create more of itself? Is this how red is created by stealing calves? Because the creature didn't like kill and savage any of the other cows. It just stole the calf. It abducted it. Maybe it wanted to have more red, you know, because it seems to be heavily outnumbered.
Yeah, it didn't really make a lot of sense. It was more so for visual spectacle. When we were watching this, like, 'cause there's a lot of interesting screenshots that you can make out of this one, but none of it really makes a lot of sense.
Yes, there was some good visual settings there. The young boy, our young warrior, our hero to be, whose story this is, then hits the red thing. And enslaves it with a magical green glowy thing, which makes it completely obedient to him. And the other people don't seem to mind. You know, the people are like, oh, you enslaved the monster. That's pretty cute. I guess we'll bring him home or something.
Yeah, you know, you can also clearly tell the monster's, like, not 100% with it, but it's, like, clearly resisting or trying to struggle against it, but it can't quite. But they seem like, you know, that'll do the trick. It's under our control now.
Yep, which, again, the story itself is simplistic enough. It's a coming-of-age story. Like, he's becoming a part of the herder flock now. You know, he can join his big sister to guard the tiny piece of greenery which the flock rests upon. And again, the much of the problem is 10-minute snippets. So it's a simple story: blue good, red evil, defeat red. Bring harmony, by green.
Yeah. It sounds like it is as silly as it sounds, honestly.
It really is. So, to go over the... Oh god, no, wait. There was one more episode, Carl. Remember? The surfing episode.
Oh no!
The surfing.
That one's like the least African one, though.
That one is probably the least African one. So there's another episode where they have surfing showdowns, and they're octopus in the water, and if you don't put an octopus on your head, the octopus will eat you if you go in the water. But if you have a pure ancestral lineage, if you have a high enough, pure enough blood, I guess.
If you're not mixed, you know.
Yes, if you're not a mutt, then you get to sink to the bottom of the ocean where you can breathe, and your ancestral grandmother will come to you and be like, buck up, boy, you can save everyone because you're pure blood. And so that is what happens. And so they defeat the evil octopus people, they aren't pure blood, I presume, because when they sink, they just die, rather than use their ancestors.
They sink tons of little... they knock off the octopus on their head. And the other octopuses, because there's not one on their head, will kill them.
Yes.
So they just start murdering the people that aren't pure.
Yes.
And what I got from that story was that race mixing was bad. Thank you, Disney. Thank you, Disney.
And the biggest point, too, is that this world was created because of climate change, and climate change is created by a titanic radioactive octopus out to sea. So the climate change people were correct. They just hadn't quite nailed down the reason why they were correct.
It wasn't humans. It was atomic octopuses and squid things.
Atomic octopus. As far as we know, there's only one.
Yes, and there's it has little baby ones though.
Yes, that's true. It has made little baby ones. So, all in all, what did this achieve? Did this set up, did this show, Africa is full of creativity and it could totally do something on the scale of the West? Now, is that a fair expectation? Is it a fair expectation to think, okay, we're going to see the next Superman, or the next Lord of the Rings, or the next Beowulf, the next epic here? Probably not. But I feel like it failed 9 times out of 10 to create something that felt different from the West. I would say that episode 8, the Arab-style episode, that one did succeed. And I would say that episode... which was the... Now I'm losing track here as I'm looking through all of the down.
There may be 10 episodes, but they vary in quality quite drastically.
Yes, quite drastically indeed.
What was that one about? I'll remember.
Will you? Will you truly?
Tell
I'm
me.
not so sure you would.
I'll figure it out.
Probably the most African one other than that was 3, which was the one with the grey boy.
Yeah, the grey one. That was good.
Yes, that one was more Africanized. And I will say that for the surfing episode, or at least I haven't seen many movies about surfing being used as a form of combat martial arts. So, you know, that's certainly something new and a twist, I will admit. But
Yeah.
it didn't give anything stand out. Like, I do miss the creativity here. I really do. Because in Star Wars Visions, there were some things there which had a genuine spark to it. Like, I quite liked, for example, the first episode in the second season. The one with the obviously evil Sith lady with the halo that appeared angelic. That was very interesting. Like, that is a twist on the story of the Sith. Okay. I quite liked the one with the furry, Lop, which showed the Imperium as potentially a benevolent force as well, rather than just purely destructive, but still counteracted by the traditions of the original population. I feel like too many of these studios endeavored to tell very classical stories rather than African stories. And they did so in visual representation as well, by and large.
That definitely feels like the case. Because when you watch this, you won't be too surprised to be like, this feels like a hollow copy of what we're already doing. Like a pale imitation. Nothing more.
And when it tried to go some completely different direction, like 10, the last episode, I mean, they certainly did go in a completely different direction, there's no doubt about that, but when the final message then becomes, oh, well, you know, Africa's boned, evacuate now. Well,
it's a bad message. It's like defeatism. It's like, it feels weird when you watch it because it's like, Africa's lost. They don't deserve they don't deserve our help.
yes.
Let them perish. And it's like, what the
It
That's bleak.
certainly is different, but I don't necessarily think different is good. Because the hope here was that we would see something uniquely African, something special, something that would rival what the West has created. And again, perhaps that is simply unreasonable to expect on the first go around. But nothing here truly convinced me that there was something unique that these studios could create, at least not under the umbrella of Disney. And in the cases where you do see something unique, like episode 8 with the scrolls, for example, that too felt more classically cartoony, a young girl's coming-of-age story and finding her path rather than unique to the area.
Yeah. It just didn't really feel like it had any cultural influences.
Yes, it felt like it was somewhat lacking in original inspiration.
Which you think there'd be a ton to pull from, because all things considered, if I remember right, The Lion King is actually inspired by an African tale, if I remember right.
Yes, I think if anything, they do need to decouple from the whole Afrofuturism thing, because, well, there's only so many ways in which you can make glowy cyberpunk buildings.
Yes, it ends up just looking like either A, mud huts, if you want to make it look African, or B, it just looks like a Western house.
Yes, they need to endeavor to create something in between. They need to take the inspiration of Africa and then give it a different vibe. Not merely place glow lands on it, like they did in a 6, where you see some African-inspired architecture, but it's glowing. And that's all they did with it. It glows now. Like, that is not good enough.
It glows now. Yeah. It lacks creativity, which is Which is actually kind of sad, because you would expect something more exotic with this.
Yes, something more noteworthily different would have been appreciated. Though I suppose the focus on social media was very much so novel.
Yeah, that was a blindsided thing they did there with those 2 episodes.
Yes. All in all, widely different levels of quality, with a couple of real standouts, but most of them below the par, and falling well short of the occasionally heavily varying standards of Visions as well, honestly. I would like to see Disney perhaps try to experiment with this more, and try to create more uniquely stuff created from unique areas. Like, I would love to see a Slavic version next, for example.
Ooh.
Because I'll tell you this, the Slavs, they know how to tell a good horror story, if nothing else.
Pretty dark.
Yes. And perhaps more of this too, because I believe that, because here's the thing too, again, it is unfair to expect brand new, or probably not brand new, but small, relatively speaking, studios to create the next epic just because they've been approached by Disney, especially with 10-minute slots to their disposal. But perhaps, given a bit more time and a bit more attention via projects like these, we might be starting to see something with the courage to grow a little bit more radical, shall we say.